Hello there. Today I'm looking at a mature Riesling from the Mosel. So I have here a bottle of Graacher Himmelreich from Weingut Kees-Keiren, and this is from the excellent 2007 vintage. So as I say, we're in the Mosel here. Kees-Keiren, small family-owned estate who trace records of them producing wine back to the mid-17th century. However, the Kees-Keiren name doesn't come about until 1920, when Angela Kieren from Graach marries Ernst-Joseph Kees from Kilnheim, and thus the name becomes that dual name. The current generation running the winery are Ernst-Joseph and his brother Werner, and they took over in 1980, with both of them as qualified enologists, but with Ernst-Joseph concentrating on making the wine and Werner largely working in the vineyards as the viticulturist. Their winery also mentions Nicholas as being the next generation of the family who's actively involved in working in the winery, but doesn't actually detail whether he is either Ernst-Joseph or Werner's son, or neither. However, they do sort of say, as a small family winery, everybody in the family pitches in when work is needed. The Graacher Himmelreich vineyard is northeast of the town of Bernkastel, sitting on a steep hillside above Graach, this small village. It's a Großlager, a classified vineyard, and a portion of it sits above another Großlager of the village, Graacher Domprost. The steepness here, I believe, is about 70% in places, and the soils are weathered clay and blue slate, so relatively friable slate soils that warm up quite readily. So the hillside facing southwest, excellent sun exposure, but is sheltered from the wind, so it's a relatively sheltered site, allowing good ripening. Graacher Himmelreich's really quite a large vineyard. It's 87 hectares, not entirely owned by this one family. And the translation of Himmelreich means Kingdom of Heaven. Having acquired their vineyards through marriage, the family now actually have vineyards which stretch along a 30-kilometre stretch of the Mosel Valley, which is not massively convenient, but thankfully their wineries in Graach, which is in the middle of that 30 kilometres, which enables them to keep control of the management of their vineyards. They don't have to subcontract out to somebody else, so they have total control over quality there. It's worth pointing out that on the label here we have a gold strip, and that is a Goldene Kammerpreismünze, so a gold medal from the Landesweinprämierung, the state wine competition, a large competition, and they get somewhere in the region of 17,000 entries a year from something like 1,200 wineries, so it's a pretty major affair. And this is judged by professionals, many of them winemakers, some of them wine critics. So if you see a wine with one of these strips, or these days more likely it is a circular medallion in either gold, silver or bronze from the competition, you can be sure not only that the wine's of good quality, but it should be typical for the region it is from. I've alluded to the fact that 2007 was a good vintage. What happened in 2007 was that spring was relatively early, it was warm, it was dry, and as a result flowering was even and quite large crops were set. The summer wasn't so warm, probably a good job actually, because that might have reduced the aromatics there, but then a warm period in the autumn, in the September and the October, was sufficient to ripen grapes and produce a large, attractive crop with quite luscious character, not necessarily the most edgy, but with sort of lovely, completely ripe flavours. As a Spatlese, this will have been picked late, so really what you're waiting for is for the berries to have turned to a golden yellow colour from a sort of a greenness that they'll have at the initial stage of ripening. So they should be sort of a translucent golden colour. Everything's picked by hand. I'm saying 70% slope, so it's impossible to machine harvest. And the fruit is handled very gently to take it to the nearby winery, so there's very little time for it to oxidise, and thus you're preserving the aromas. Fermentation takes place in stainless steel tanks, so again preserving aromas, enabling cooling to go on to give quite a slow ferment, and they'll keep the vineyard plot batches in small batches, fermenting just in the largest tanks they have are 2,000 litres. The wines age with the yeast lees. They don't actually say for how long. I should imagine for 6 to 12 months. That'll be the fine lees prior to bottling. And that's all the detail I have on the winemaking. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Its time in bottle has given it a lovely colour. That has a dark yellow to amber to pale gold colour. As I swirl it, actually it seems to cling to the glass a little. I mean, it's not going to be particularly high in alcohol. It says there 8.5%. So, it'll be fruit richness giving weight, not alcohol. Let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are heady and ripe. There's a sort of it's like a peach syrup note there. Often I find that Mosel Rieslings have a lime character. Now there is a little bit of that underlying sharp citrus, but it's not really to the fore. In fact, what comes to the fore is more a lifted aroma, almost akin to sort of really ripe passion fruit or something like that. I guess that's the lusciousness of the vintage and a sheltered site with good sunlight exposure. So let's taste and see what we make of that. On the palate, that has good sweetness, and the sweetness is to the fore. There's a slightly syrupy texture. Maybe this is light to medium bodied. It's not huge. The alcohol's not impinging on the fruit whatsoever. The fruit is quite developed. It's got a richness to it, almost like sort of a rich peach note. There is a slight sort of toasty note to it. And what do I mean by toasty in this situation? I was thinking about that the other day, and actually it's slightly the caramelized sugars that you'll get when you toast a piece of toast, or you toast a barrel or something like that, and those sort of slightly developed sugar notes on the top there. I suppose on the finish, the sort of limey acidity is coming through. It's got good acidity, but the acidity is really not to the fore. It's allowing the luscious fruit to come out. I think this is a fully developed wine. I don't think it has quite the nervous acidity to allow it to age for a lot longer. I mean, you could keep it for another 5 or 6 years very happily, I'm sure of that, but it's not something I would think that you could keep for another 10, 20 years or something like that. I think it's probably drinking at its best now, and is providing some very enjoyable drinking. So I've got a finish there that has just a little sweetness. It's not in any way cloying. There's almost a sort of a honeyed note to the end. There is that limey acidity starting to just poke through. I suppose there are those lifted notes I was talking about earlier with sort of slightly ripe passion fruit notes as well. So a really lovely mature wine that's showing really nicely now. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you find this interesting. I hope you'll try a few Mosel Rieslings, because I really do think that with this sort of low alcohol and beautiful freshness, these are some wines that offer fabulous, refreshing drinking, often at quite an affordable price. So do please tell us what you think. Do leave some comments below. Do like and share the video if you've enjoyed it. Do please sign up and follow us on YouTube. But most importantly, I hope you'll manage to find the time to join us again for another tasting very soon. Goodbye now.